With the top level project plan done, we look at the guidance and see that the next task is to create the initial user stories. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll switch to the stories view. We see that our stories list is empty, and create new user story and start entering our user stories. Click Save to save the user story. In the user story, we can assign the number of person days. We can add details to the story and the stage of completion and the state. And if we want, we can capture images to the story the same way that we did for bugs. Let's add another story. Now we have a number of user stories created. We can view those stories on a storyboard. Let's just scale the storyboard down and start to move these into place. Stories can be laid out in the storyboard in any format that you like. They can even overlap. This means that the storyboard can mimic a real-world storyboard very closely, which allows easy updating between the real-world storyboard and the virtual storyboard. This storyboard is nice and live. You can actually edit in place here, so we can type right on the card. We can also flip the card over and type right on the back of the card. We can also expand the card to full screen, which is a really nice way to work when you're in a scrum and you want to be able to talk to your own personal story and take ownership of it. It can be flipped over in this mode as well, and the back can be written on. The other nice thing you can do with a storyboard is open up a full screen version of it. Now back to our guidance window, we can see that the next step is to capture the initial test cases. So let's do that. To add a test case to a story, just click the Test Cases button, type the title of the new test case, to edit the details of a test case, just click the pencil, which takes us to the subscreen where we can enter any details that we need to. We can even add subtasks at this level and documentation, which we'll come back to in a moment. The test cases appear in the test case list. Let's go back to our guidance to see what we do next. We've created our initial test cases. Now let's create our initial iteration plan. We'll click the iterations button. We have only one iteration at the moment. Remember that our project start date is July 1, but our iteration start date is August 1, and that's reflected down here. Let's start adding iterations to the project. Now that we have some iterations, let's just stretch them out so that they're a month long each. We can of course edit the length of the iteration by typing in the day here. To change the names of the iterations, just type. Now that we have our master project iteration plan laid out, let's start assigning work to the iterations. If we look at user story 1279, we can see the person days are 5. Let's just drag that and drop it into iteration 1. We can see that the planned work is now 5 person days. We're at 16% capacity. Let's drag another chunk of work in and drop it, and we can keep dragging and dropping work until that iteration is full. If we want to see the details, we can expand it, and it might look as though we have more work than can fit, and that's because the development team size is 2. If we adjust the development team size down to 1, we can see that all these numbers change, and in fact, back in the dashboard, we can look at the development team size for all iterations and adjust that. and apply it to all the iterations. Or we can set the team size back up to 2 and apply that. Then on an iteration by iteration basis, we can fine tune the development team size. Okay, so we're back in iteration 1, and this is our planned work. And if we keep adding work, we can see that we'll eventually get to the point where we'll be over our maximum allocation of work. And this tells us how we can fix that. We can either move work to another iteration. So let's move this work to another iteration, and we're now back under our work limit. Let's drop it back in, and we're over. The other way to change the over limit is to, of course, bring down the work for one particular, bring down the person days for one particular story. And then the last way, of course, would be to increase the development team size on the iteration. So that makes it very easy for us to see how workload affects iteration loading. If our development team size was 1, for instance, we would have to move a fair bit of this work over to the next iteration in order to get the iteration under its limit. Now, as the work starts to get done, let's suppose user story 1273 gets work completed against it. We can see the stage of completion is not started. If we set the stage of completion to in progress, the green timeline starts to move along. We're at 9%. The 9% appears, the in progress appears down here. We can, if the low latency moves to ready for test, the green bar moves, and we can see our iteration overall work completed bar start to move along. Now, one of the interesting things about this is its ability to track your work progress versus today. I'm just going to adjust the system date. So now we're pretending the current day is August 15th. This today bar shows the current day, and it marches along with time. You can't adjust that, but what it shows is that the work completed is lagging behind the current day. So as this day marches along, the goal is to always ensure that the green is up to the current day bar. So if this project was on time, it would look more like this. Now the project is ahead of time. Now the project is right on time. So that's how the today bar works. The list of plan items that appears at the beginning of the iteration gets checked off as they get done, and the green bar progresses along here. And similarly, at the end of the iteration, the finalization tasks get completed, and it's reflected here. It's also reflected up here in the summary view. One of the things Exia strives to do is give you a level of interactivity with your project that's unavailable in other systems, so you really feel like you can reach out and touch your work. So for instance, if we double click on the iteration where the story will be implemented, it takes us straight to the iteration down below, opens up the iteration detail, and highlights the story. From there, for instance, we can double click around on the different stories, and each one is highlighted in the top. Everything is live, as I say, so that you can, for instance, change the person days and see that status reflected right away. You can even go so far as to flip over to the storyboard and double click on a story, see it highlighted in the storyboard, and as we move it across the storyboard, imagine now that I'm synchronizing with a real world board, maybe sitting in a war room and trying to make this storyboard look like the one on the wall. I just move the cards across to reflect the wall board, and right away my status is updated. You can see the green bars jump down below. So for instance, your remote team in India would be instantly updated with all this status. So very high level of interactivity, very live feel, and the ability to really reach out and sort of touch your project in an interactive way, give you the ability to manage in a way that's more fluid, more easy, more fun, and gives you better information than any other project management system available today.